You're listening to Well Met,
a
Hearthstone podcast brought to you by BlizzPro.com. Well Met.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 54 of Well Met Podcast. We are a Hearthstone podcast brought to you by BlizzPro.com. Headquartered in Denver, Colorado, I am John Horstman, and with me is the crew. But before we do, that's for all you naysayers who send us emails every week like, we know where Kevin's from, we know where JR's from, but we don't know where John's from. Now you know, headquartered in Denver, Colorado. From Saskatoon, Canada, it's the man, the myth, the legend, Kevin Hovdestad. Hey, Kev.
How's it going, John? Good to be back. It was a crazy week. I was out at my sister's for Easter, and I drove 6 hours back, and I literally pulled in time to sit down, boot up my computer, and be here to record the show. So I'm still a little zonked from being on the highway, but there's just so much stuff to talk about. I think we have a tremendous show planned tonight with lots of cool stuff. And then you get to have a pretty cool looking show next week. Yes,
we do. So Kevin and JR, I've only been able to pay for them to be on the show 51 weeks out of the year. So there's 1 week.
That's
I'm just kidding.
Works, yeah.
No. As fate would have it, JR and Kevin are off doing great things next week. So it's just going to be me. So just me by myself doing the show, one-man show. Then I realized that was a ridiculously stupid idea and that I'm going to need 3 people to help me accomplish what we can do with JR and Kevin. And so next week, we've got Jocelyn Moffat returning from The Angry Chicken. We've got Tannen Grace coming and sitting in again as well. And then we're going to do a bit about what it takes to have the mindset of a legend player. We've got Ray C591 from Vicious Syndicate going to be on the show. So it's going to be a great show. You don't want to miss it. So make sure to come out next week, even though Kevin and JR will be gone. JR, we totally forgot about you. Kansas City, JR Cook. Hey, JR.
Well met. And I'll be gone next week. Kansas City Royals. Woo.
Oh, man. That's why.
I had to put that in there. Had to put that in there.
Of course it is. And I feel bad. You say, you shouldn't miss next week's show, and we're going to be the ones missing it. But I will be on a plane on my way to Vegas, so.
That's cool. Tannen lives in Vegas. You guys should hang out.
That'd be cool, actually. Yeah, I should definitely figure out how to get a hold of him before I go down there.
Yeah. All right, guys. Before we get into all the news and stuff, let's talk about our weeks in Hearthstone. JR, what have you been up to in Hearthstone this week?
Been still playing the Zoo Hobgoblin. For some reason, the name suddenly escaped me. The Zoo Hobgoblin deck that I talked about last week.
Are you probably playing that probable deck? Probably?
Yeah, sure. Anyway.
Sorry. I had to do it.
Yeah.
So how you been doing? What rank are you at?
I think I got up to rank 6. I wanted to get up to rank 5, but I just didn't have the time for it. And unfortunately, work is going to be crazy this week, so I'm probably not going to play that much this week either. But yeah, it's going to be pretty fun. It's been pretty fun, I should say. And we've been also been playing that. You threw me off by leaving, John.
I'm sorry. There is a tow truck outside of my window, and I forgot to close my windows. Yeah. Proceed.
Oh, okay, but yeah. Clash Royale, we've been playing that too, a little bit here and there. And I just mentioned the clan last week, and it blew up, got filled up all the way in one day. And if you are interested, if you are part of the clan or interested in becoming part of the clan, or because we might be creating another one, come join us over at our Discord channel, which is discord.blizzpro.com. And if you don't know what Discord is, it's just a chat channel with voice activation on it as well. So you can come and just chat with us and hang out with us and everything else. So
awesome.
There you go.
It was really insane. We had 7 or 8 people, I felt like, before the show. And then afterward, within 24 hours, we were at 50, which was such a surprise to us. But it's cool. And they're all way better than me. So just like Hearthstone, can't be the best anywhere. Really, really hard life. Kevin, how about your week in Hearthstone, man? What have you been up to?
Not a whole pile. I did get a chance to play a little for a change while I was out kind of visiting with family and friends. I have a tendency to take my iPad with me when I travel, and I play a fair bit of Hearthstone when I'm just like on downtime. Like somebody else is making dinner, there's nothing I can do to help, so I'm just on the couch, and it's the easiest thing to do to just kill 20 minutes. I actually was sitting at like rank 11 last week, just didn't want to talk about it at all because I hadn't been playing, and I cruised with like 2 losses straight to rank 5 running mid-range shaman just to make a point.
Nice.
People are always giving me a hard time about like, when you talk about the meta, why don't you talk about the meta at like rank 16? What's the rank 16 meta like? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like you can play anything, and as long as you are good at the game, you will make it to rank 5. Rank 5 is where the game starts. So I played a mid-range shaman, and like, you'd be surprised, but there's I can't remember who I took the list from. It was somebody that posted it on Twitter, and it actually was like surprising how effective mid-range shaman is right now. Like I'm at like an 80% win ratio up to this point. I don't know how far I can go with it, but I'm kind of tempted. I have the day off work tomorrow, and I'm thinking maybe I just keep going and see like how far I can go.
Why not? Yeah, why not?
If I hit legend with mid-range shaman, that like when it's like, I think everybody is basically in agreement that if you had to pick like a worst deck out there at any given time in the last like 6 months, it's probably mid-range shaman. So to hit legend with that would be like, now I have all these questions about whether or not making a meta report even makes any sense anymore.
Right. Well, the one thing you have going for it is everyone's probably mulliganing for aggro shaman.
Totally mulliganing against aggro, and they have no idea how to do win condition math against shaman anymore. Like nobody counts for Alakir Rockbiter ever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, why would you? But yeah, I felt the same way I ran into a tempo mage the other day that instead of running mirror entities was running duplicate and ice block. No mirror entity, no counter spell. So I'm playing around all these things. I'm like, oh, it's got to be mirror entity. And it messed up my turns royally and I lost. It was funny. Chat, I was streaming at the time, and it wasn't the brightest moment on the stream, that's for sure. But I did get up to rank 3. So I'm trying my hardest to make the push with the limited time I have over this next week. But we're up to rank 3. We've got 12, 13 more stars to go. So I just have to win 13 more games than I lose, and we're legends. So hopefully we keep on moving there. I think that is about it, though. Let's jump about into the news.
This week in Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft.
English is hard. Very, very hard. So this week, we got a bunch of cards introduced for us, and we actually had the card voting returned. So, Kevin, for those who have maybe this is their first major expansion or haven't been into the scene very much, card voting is not something brand new to Hearthstone expansions. So, kind of what is it and how does it work?
We just say, oh no, we're doing English still, right? You had me all thrown off there.
Oh man, this is not going to go well. We can just turn it off now. We could.
Okay, no. So in the previous expansions leading up to their release, generally Blizzard throws something up on the site where you can pick which card you want to see revealed next. And right now they're doing it through streamers and third-party reveals. Mostly it's been major streams, but different languages. Like there have been different people from different parts of the world. We've seen 4 of the 5 so far, 1 yet to come. So you can actually hit up the Hearthstone website, go to the Whispers of the Old Gods page. It's really easy to get to because everything links there right now. And I am expecting that there will be additional votes coming in the not so distant future here, where you can vote on who you want to see reveal which cards in which order, because there's a whole bunch more people who are on that list yet to release some very, very cool cards by the looks of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really cool. I have to ask you guys, without giving it away, on the different one, we had Crip. I don't want to watch the second person, Forsen, Show, and Tom. Out of those ones, who did you guys vote for? Which one did you want to see when they first came out? More than anything, JR, did you vote?
I voted the first day because I forgot to go back and vote the other days, and I went ahead and voted for Crip just because for the fact that whenever he reveals a card, it's usually pretty entertaining. And out of all the cards revealed so far, I think he also did it the best, where he told everybody exactly when he was going to reveal it.
Yes,
he did it up on YouTube. People didn't have to wait around all day to get their card revealed, and I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I went ahead and voted for him for that reason alone. And I hope that other people that do these reveals take that into account and see what Crypt did and hopefully do the same.
I completely agree with you. It was, I think, my favorite card reveal. He knows how to make an event, which is what it should be. So it was definitely, I think, the one that I enjoyed the most. But I think that's enough about that. Should we just go ahead and talk about some new cards? Does that sound way better?
I think so.
We've got a bunch of cards to go through. So, bunch of new cards came out. We're going to jump through them just like every other podcast. I'm just kidding. We'll put our own spin on it. Don't you worry. First, how many cards are we reviewing today? Even like 15, 16, something like that? Lots of cards.
I think I counted 14 or so.
But
I think it was 14.
Shortly after we hung up for the night last week for episode 53, Blizzard goes ahead and unveils this new Warlock epic spell called Doom. It's a 10 mana Warlock spell, epic, reads destroy all minions, draw a card for each. All right, so I feel like we're going to all differ on this card. It feels like the most controversial one that I see here so far. And so, Kevin, I want you to start. Tell me about why you love this card.
I don't think it'll see any play. I think it's absolutely statistically just a worse twisting nether, because as Warlock, with the number of ways you have to draw cards already, to play this on 10 means you have no ability to build any kind of board of your own, and you're going to be putting this in decks that are designed to play a control game to clear the board, kind of like maybe a Reno style Warlock or something along those lines, which means that you would be super scared of the fatigue that this card could create for you in the late game. It would be it's actually probably unplayable. Most of the cards that we've seen in the past that you play on 10 don't get play because they often don't allow you to assert yourself on the board, especially if they're removal cards, right? Playing a turn where all you do is clear the board hurts a ton, because you still need to be able to, behind that, put something down that says, hey, okay, now I have board presence. I'm not just responding this turn and then waiting to respond again next turn. So, I mean, at best, maybe at best, in like a Reno style Warlock, you might see it as a one of instead of some other removal card. But I think, honestly, you just won't see it played at all. And it's interesting. We're going to see this theme a lot. I intend to talk about this a fair bit tonight. But there's a whole bunch of these new epic spells that have been introduced in the last week where I don't think you will ever run multiple of them. There's a ton of epic cards that have been introduced that honestly look like you will only ever want one of them in your deck. And to play two of them might actually be like a trap. So I think it's curious that we're seeing so many of those types of cards, and this one I think slots right in there. I won't play it, and if you do play it, understand that playing two would be a terrible idea.
All right, I can get behind that. JR, what do you think?
I mean, I mostly have to agree with Kevin's sentiments on that. The only thing I will say about the card is I do think it is a rather interesting idea. I do like the fact that you can potentially do some pretty fun things with it. It's almost like a reverse Deathwing in a way, where you're actually gaining cards. You don't get a body on the board, but you're actually gaining cards while destroying everything on the board. So that's kind of cool. But I really doubt it sees play as well. But I think it would be fun to try to make it work, to be honest, because I think the card has potential, but I doubt we're going to see it.
I'm going to chime in here for a second, because I totally agree with you. You're totally right. I mean, Warlock has the best hero power in the game, arguably, with the ability to draw cards. Like, You can draw cards every turn if you want to, which is an absolute luxury. Warlock doesn't run out of cards and almost always guarantees at least 2 cards per play past like turn 5 or 6. So you've got that going against this card, but there is a mechanic that really intrigues me that exists in Hearthstone, that if we see more cards implement this could be interesting. Now imagine if we had another version of Void Caller, something that can pull something from your hand. This card immediately gets a lot better, right? You're drawing cards and you're flooding cards on a board. So like a Death Rattle, bring this specific card into your hand or whatever, or onto your board. Could be something really cool, but it seems really niche. I don't see it working. But that's the mechanic I'm watching for as these new cards are revealed, to see, because if they do implement that, this might actually be a good card. But until then, as Hearthstone exists today, there's no need for it. Warlock doesn't really need card draw, and you have Twisting Nether for 2 less mana. So I don't see it. I think we're all in pretty much agreement on that one.
Yeah. We haven't shown the card yet, but with the new Legendary God card could be also kind of fun if you're playing a lot of Death Rattles.
Sure.
But
yeah, I totally agree with that.
But you're talking about 2 10-cost spells at that point, but could be fun.
All right, well, let's talk about this next one then. Kevin, tell us about the Tentacle of N'Zoth.
I can do that. So Tentacle of N'Zoth is a 1-mana 1/1 with a Death Rattle that reads, deal 1 damage to all minions. So this is a cheaper but not as good Explosive Sheep, or a cheaper but worse with no Taunt Unstable Ghoul, both of which are cards that are going away in Standard. So this is, I think, the mandatory activator for whirlwind effects in any deck archetype that requires them, whether that's something like a Patron Warrior, or you want this maybe as emergency removal that could be played down behind like a Wild Pyromancer and used as a soft board clear. It's not a great card, but whirlwind effects have so many applications in the game already. I have to imagine that it's a card that will find a place in things like Patron at minimum, likely actually in decks that utilize any sort of self-damage effect at all for any reason.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that's an on-par assessment. JR, what do you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's going to probably be a must-have card in Patron Warrior. If Patron Warrior is to continue to exist within Standard, which it does have potential to do, I think it's going to be a must-add card in there. And I could also see it potentially in Mage, but I sort of like Exploding Sheep better, but paired with Exploding Sheep, it can really do a lot of damage. But
Explosive Sheep's going away.
It is. That's right. I forgot about that. So yeah.
Yeah.
If you're looking for Explosive Sheep, there you go.
The one thing I will say that I like about this is that it might be also an interesting early game tech choice against a lot of the aggro minion styles, because other than things like Finley or Tunnel Trog that can trade into it and still survive, this is a super easy thing to slap down on a board and say, no, your Flame Imp's not going anywhere, you're not getting any value out of a lot of the 1-drops in the game, or as a way to contest things like token deck styles, right? If you're trying to deal with a Paladin player who's got Justicar out already and is putting down multiple tokens per turn, this is an easy board clear against that. So there's applications for it, at least. And at 1 mana, there's lots of ways, like maybe there's going to be a gimmick where you want to use this with like Camel Hunter, who knows, right? There's lots of things that it interacts with, so I'm excited.
Yeah. Overall, I hate that it's the kind of unexciting cards that are going to see the most play. You've got something like Doom, which is so cool, so enticing, and it's like probably not going to see play. And you have this 1 mana gross little tentacle here who is probably going to see more play than probably 50% of the cards that we're going to see this expansion, if not more. We've got a Shaman Legendary coming up, and no better person to intro Shaman to us than JR, because he loves aggro Shaman so much. JR, tell us about this Shaman Legendary?
Well, first of all, this is not going to go in your aggro shaman deck. I apologize for that, but it is a 5 mana, 4/6 card called Halaziel the Ascended, with the text: whenever your spells deal damage, restore that much health to your hero. And I am totally excited for this card, for the simple fact that I love the idea of Control Shaman. I have played around with Control Shaman in the current iteration of the meta, and it's not like it's missing some cards to really make it good. And I think this has potential to make Control Shaman like really good, especially when you pair this with something like Lightning Storm or Elemental Destruction or whatever that one's called. I think it's called Elemental Destruction, right?
Sounds good. Yeah.
The one that does like 4 to 5 or 5 damage to everything.
Yeah, it's for like 3 mana and overloads for 4 to 5.
Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about this card. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin's been playing the mid-range shamans, so I feel like he's probably going to be more of an authority of me on this, but it seems perfectly fine in a way to be able to slow shaman down a little bit. It doesn't have overload, which I think works in its favor pretty heavily. Statting is kind of neat. Seeing 6 health for 5 mana is not something you see a whole lot, and that means that it can trade fairly favorably into most 5 mana cost cards, so I think that's good. Plus, it has a really great card text, especially if you're dealing with aggro and other types of things. So I think this is a really solid card. Kev?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. On curve, there's nothing in the game right now that kills it. 5 mana is sort of the break point at which we stop seeing stat blocks where they're aggressively statted. You see 5/4s for 4, sometimes as class cards, things like Tomb Pillager or like the Tall Strider or whatever, right? There's lots of like one-off examples of that. But once you get up to 5, you never see a 6/5 for 5. It's just not done. So the 6 health breakpoint basically can't be removed by anything other than Fireball in the game right now, or like I guess after turn 5, there's lots of things that will answer it. But if you could get it out on curve, or if you could play it out in tandem with something, the effect is super powerful. I think this is a card that gets dropped into a ton of shaman decks. I think it will probably end up in just about every shaman list as things stand right now, because all of shaman's removal is so spell based. Shaman for the last little while has been a class that's been forced to use spells as burn or run a lot of minions and try to fight for the board, because that's what everybody's doing in the current meta. But when all the crazy death rattle stuff goes away, being able to throw this down and play, like if you played Halazel and like an elemental or what am I going for here? What's the Lightning Storm is the 3 mana removal card. Like you're going to be able to regenerate a ton of health. That's way more efficient than even playing like I think honestly that's probably more efficient than playing Healing Wave more often than not, especially if you don't win the joust. So this is probably one of my favorite cards that we've seen so far in the new set for that reason alone.
And I know we say this every time about Shaman. I feel like every expansion we're like, this is just the card that Shaman needs to be very good. And then 3 months later, we laugh about Shaman and how we thought it was going to be good. I feel like I don't want this to be this card, but I feel like this is good enough that it will be played. So
yeah, I don't know if it's going to be the card that is going to make Shaman good, but it's going to be a card that'll make Control Shaman viable. Where right now it sort of is, but really isn't. I think this will make Control Shaman viable. Will it be your tier 1 deck? Probably not. It'll be fun to play. Heck yeah, that's why I like it.
Yeah. Let's jump on to the next ones here. So next up, we've got N'Zoth's First Mate. It was in junior year of high school, back of a hot rod, N'Zoth's First Mate. But it is a 1 mana, 1/1 pirate. It's a warrior card. Stop looking at me. Battle Cry, equip a 1/3 rusty hook. JR, tell me what you think about this card.
Well, if it was back in high school, he gets a rusty hook. That's a bit of a problem. But no. I think a lot of people are pretty hyped about this card. They think it's pretty awesome because it's a 1-drop that gives you a weapon, and is pretty good right off the bat against like aggro decks, to try to keep up tempo. I don't know if it's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be used and constructed as much as what people think. It is, however, an amazing arena card. Like, I would choose this in arena a lot, quite a bit of times. In standard or even wild, in constructed play, I really see Fiery War Axe as still being better, even though it's in the 2 spot, just for the fact that you can wait a turn and equip that better weapon, or coin out first turn if you need. But it is a pirate, so pirate synergy, which never sees hardly any play. So what do you think, Kevin?
No. Just no.
Really?
I don't think so. No.
You don't think
I mean,
we're
a
going to see
1 mana
upgrade come back?
No, I don't think so. A 1 mana 1/1 minion is not a great play. Being able to get a 1/3 weapon out of it, which, to the best of my knowledge, has no other special stats. It's just a 1/3, like a bad Light's Justice. You as the warrior have so many other early game weapons. It's not like they're gonna take Fiery War Axe away from us or anything. So why, like, under what pretense would you want a 1/3 weapon? What is that going to do for you? The chip damage from that is terrible compared to just a standard warrior weapon. Warrior needs weapons, absolutely, and like I think you're more likely to see like a Arathi Weaponsmith make a comeback than you are something like this. I just don't see the value here at all. Getting a 1/3 weapon doesn't make up for the fact that you've played an understated minion that won't trade with anything, and I don't think pirate synergy is in a place where warrior is racing to play pirates.
Okay, ye of little faith.
Always.
I have faith in that Rusty Hook. I have a feeling that we're going to see something. We're going to see some pretty good weapon synergy to get that up. Because imagine what it would be with like now a 2/4 Rusty Hook by turn 2. Could be pretty cool. So I think there could be times where it's going to see play, but you're right. A 1/1 has to be a very control heavy meta. Like you can't be in a meta where your opponent is churning out 2/3s and 3/2s and 1/3s with taunt on turn 1 and then playing this card because it's absolutely bogus. But
and I don't think you could ever play it outside of the early game. Like turn 5 or later, like you would top deck into this and go, oh, I can't use this at all.
It's chip damage. Plus, there's so many different ways that, I guess, not for warrior, there's not so many different ways that you can augment your weapon, but maybe there could be. Maybe that's what Blizzard needs to do next. If there's a way to augment the weapon, I think that this could be cool. But until then,
well, there are more weapon synergies, right? If we see more cards that have like the Bloodsail Raider, Dread Corsair type interactions, like all of the pirate cards that have weapon interactions look really good on its face with this. This could be a great arena card. But in general, yeah, I think it's definitely not in the place where we're going to see this hit a bunch of deck lists day 1 of standard.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, all right. Enough about N'Zoth's first love affair. Let's go into the Faceless Shambler. Kevin, take us away.
Sure. So the Faceless Shambler is a neutral epic minion. It has a mana cost of 4, 1 health, 1 attack, but reads Taunt and Battlecry, copy a friendly minion's attack and health. So it's a slightly cheaper, strictly worse Faceless Manipulator that is the most vulnerable to silence thing in the game. I think.
I think it's personally a pretty great card, to be honest. I mean, Faceless is a pretty good card to begin with, and I think this card is better than Faceless just because it also gives you Taunt as well, unless you use that Faceless on a Taunt to begin with. I don't know. The only thing I don't like about it is that it would only target a friendly minion instead of being able to. I would like it much more if it was able to also target like your opponent's minion or something like that. Just in case your opponent puts down an awesome creature, you can put that out there to potentially defend against it. But I think it's for 4 mana. I think it's a pretty good card.
I think it's a fair card. I think this is totally fair. It's fairly statted. There's a lots of scenarios where this could do well. I could see that immediately going in like a handlock or something like that. Add to another taunt, one of those big pesky minions, those can't attack minions, things like that. Like, I think there's some exciting synergies that this one could have. At the same time, I don't know if I would run this instead of just Faceless Manipulator. And it's 1 mana more, and I don't think I would run both. So the question becomes is how often am I in a scenario where Faceless Manipulator is too slow by 1 mana, and I need to run this and lose the ability to be able to copy my opponent's minions or mine minions exactly as they exist. And so far, I'm not imaginative enough to be able to fathom something like that. So I think Faceless Manipulator is strictly better. And because of that, I don't think I would ever run this. At the same time, I think it's a fair card. I think it's a well-costed card. I think it's an exciting card. But I'm not worried about silence, to Kevin's point. There's too few silences. You can say that about any card with any sort of text effect on the card. But at the same time, I just don't think it's good enough to see play against similar cards that do similar things.
Yeah. Okay, so my question becomes this, right? JR has already correctly pointed out that this has to be used on a friendly minion. For it to be better than just playing a Sen'jin Shieldmaster, which is a 4 mana taunt, you have to play this on something with a better stat block than a 4-drop, which means you have to play it in tandem with a 5 or higher mana minion on your own side of the board, or you have to play something worth more than that and have it survive. So you're totally banking with this on never having to really play it in pair with something, because what you're going to have to play it with a 5 or 6 drop that has better stats than a 4 drop, or you're going to have something stick on the board, at which point you're already ahead. I don't see a world in which you would want to run this card over just any other 4 mana taunt card. Like it's a hyper specific set of conditions where odds are, unless there's something really squirrely going on, you're probably already ahead. If you can slap this down and copy the 4/12 off of a Ysera, you win. And if that was your strategy, why weren't you doing that by playing something like a Defender of Argus next to that existing Ysera? Like the number of options you have on turn 4 as a neutral card across all of the options that exist in the game already, there's no good reason why this would be your first choice with everything we know right now.
But you're missing cards like if I have something decent out already, and then next turn I buff it up with something like Abusive Sergeant or any of those other cards that can buff a minion up, and then slap this down on it, then it becomes much more powerful than what you're saying.
Sure, but that's a huge combo. You're talking about a 3-card combo to pull it off, right? An existing minion plus a buff minion or spell plus the copy. Like, I don't think it's going to happen. It's way too combo dependent.
Whoa.
Referee,
ladies.
John, what is your
Break
deal?
it up for a second. Okay, so
2 minutes for high sticking.
Right. Okay. I love hockey, by the way. I'm so glad that it's still hockey season. Anyways, I don't think that standard is going to allow for a meta that is now that you cannot be losing and still have minions on the board. Right now, as it exists, like losing is something where it's like every turn they clear your board, and unless you have a board clear to, kind of stop them clearing you off, you're just screwed. I don't think that that's what the quote unquote new Hearthstone is going to be. So I think that it's perfectly legitimate to be losing and be able to have a minion survive a turn. So I don't necessarily love that point because I do think that Hearthstone is a game, and if the developers are doing their job right, it should be a game where I can lose and still feel like I had at least something on my board at some point and I got outmathed and outplayed. I think that's a healthy Hearthstone. At the same time, again, it just comes down to I don't think there's better stuff. I do think there's better stuff out there. I don't see it being that competitive. I would rather give things death rattle. I feel like copying like a vanilla card. Basically, it gives you a vanilla card, right? You get a vanilla card that shows up as a buff that gets silenced to a 1/1. I don't think that is a tier 1, 2, or 3 as far as competitive card text goes. And so I do think it's just too slow. But JR, I'm hopeful like you. I am. I really am.
I just don't see a world in which you'd ever run it over a Tazdingo. It's that simple. Like, it's so combo dependent, and I always rag on the heavily combo dependent cards when we're at this stage of the game, because right now it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to run this over something that you could top deck and have an immediate answer. Instead, you need a 2+ card combo to make it worthwhile.
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to remind you that Patron Warrior was a tier 1 deck at one point.
Yep.
So.
All right. Let's go on to the next card then. Please, JR, tell us about Renounced Darkness.
So Renounced Darkness is a Warlock spell for 2 mana. Replace your hero power and Warlock cards with another class's. The cards cost 1 less. I'm going to ask you, Kevin, what do you think about this card?
Well, so this is another of these epic spells I was talking about earlier, where you cannot actually run 2 of them. Running a second one of these would be a direct trap. You can only ever get value out of 1. So, kind of an interesting learning curve there, because that's never been the case before. There's never been a spell where you actually could not cast a second copy of it to any effect. I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think you will probably see this show up in some variant on Zoo, where you throw in a whole bunch of the Warlock cards that are sort of, cheap, reasonably efficient. They're going to get turned into another class's cards that you then get to play at a discount. You're sometimes going to just lose horribly. You're going to throw it out, and you're going to get like a whole bunch of bad priest spells or something and feel awful about it. But you also have every opportunity that you play this, and it turns your Warlock 1 and 2 drops into really good competitive, like 1 and 2 drop cards that are efficient out of another class. Like, imagine if you were to get a whole bunch of like the Shaman Overload minions that are overcosted, and you could play them at a discount. Like, that's a phenomenal opportunity to just get so much board presence early on. The downside is that I don't think you would want to play this instead of putting something on the board early on as Zoo. So, I mean, like, short term, that's my immediate guess. Long term, I wouldn't be surprised to see this used as sort of like a weird late game win condition card, kind of in the same vein as how Elise Golden Monkey strategies work for late game fatigue situations right now, maybe. Because you don't want the Warlock hero power after a certain point, and this is a cool way to trade it away. It's way more efficient than like running Finley for no other reason than run Finley, because it doesn't do anything else for you in the game other than put that 1/3 body on the board. And you don't want to play Finley alone in the late game. You generally want to play him in the early game. I don't know. The concept is very cool. I don't know that we have an archetype yet where the execution would make sense.
I think the first part of the card about replacing the hero power is fine. It's Finley, right? It's a 2 mana Finley. The second part, though, is the part that it's very uncontrollable, right? Even if it said replace it with replace your Warlock cards with another classes that cost the same amount, I would be much more inclined to play this. Because imagine now you're not worried about, oh, cool, I'm at turn 7. I just played this card. All my Warlock cards could now be all 1 through 4 mana cards, or it could be really high costed cards, or anything in between, right?
Okay, before you go on, am I misunderstanding? My read of the card is that it replaces all of your cards with other classes cards and then discounts them.
So your Warlock cards.
Yeah, just the Warlock ones.
Your Warlock ones. So all the Warlock class cards. So we'll just say whatever, Flame Imp. Right now, Flame Imp could be replaced by Shaman. It could be replaced by an Alakir. Or it could be replaced by a Fireguard Destroyer. Or it could be replaced by a Totem Golem. Anything in between. There's so much variance for what that one. You created your mana curve. And now, by doing this, your mana curve could potentially be totally sent askew. That's the point I'm making. Where
okay, see,
even if
I thought
Sorry,
maybe it followed the existing curve. If it's just going to grab you random cards out of whatever, then yeah.
Yeah, so it grabs you random cards out of the whatever. If that card said that it replaces it with a class card of the same mana cost, I would be much more excited about this card, because then I know that, okay, I'm basically switching classes, and yeah, you're going to get some bad cards, but altogether, at least you have still a set curve that you can follow. So I think that's the weakness of this card for me, is it just takes too much out of my hands. If I get it in the late game, that's fine, but hey, I have no control over it because it's not a discover mechanic, right? So 1 out of 8 chance of getting the class that's any good for what I want to do. And then on top of that, if I only have 5 or 6 cards left, it's only changing a couple cards, so I don't think it's worth it.
And the discount doesn't make that much of a difference at that point in the game either.
Yeah, so JR.
Yeah, something Kevin mentioned right off the bat, I think you would absolutely play 2 of these, because you're building a deck specifically around this card. If you play this card, you're playing specifically to make this happen, and probably as soon as possible. And the deck that you're going to create is probably going to have an X number of neutral minions in it. Now, I don't know what the number would be at this point yet, but you would... the idea would be that to make your deck as good as possible with those neutral minions, regardless of what class you were playing. And then you have an X number of your Warlock cards you don't really even care about, because the whole idea would be you want to play this. And then those Warlock cards would then get changed into cheaper, hopefully decent cards of another class with a different hero power. So
the first one would replace the second one.
So in a sense, you have made your deck a lot better, because now the rest of the game you're playing with cheaper cards from another class, while still hopefully having a pretty decent deck around your neutral minions. And that would be the deck that I would see this being played in, is something like that.
Does it work? Does it stack twice? Has that been confirmed?
Well, no, the first one would kill the second
first one would disappear.
It's a Warlock class card.
Okay.
Yep.
The second one would just go away.
Yep.
Okay.
Right. It replaces all your Warlock cards.
It's just to have the better ability of getting it off by.
So basically, the second time it plays is the cards cost 1 less.
Yeah.
Well, no, you wouldn't ever see the second one, right? When you play the first one, the second one is a Warlock card, and it will get replaced by something else.
Got it. Oh, you guys, get out of here. You're so smart. Oh, man. We need to keep talking about these cards. There's too many. There's too many to talk about, and we're spending way too much time on these. So N'Zoth. Kevin, tell us about N'Zoth.
N'Zoth rocks. N'Zoth is one of the 4 old gods, the only one we had never seen in any context up to this point. The artwork on this card is phenomenal. If you haven't seen the gold animated version of it, look it up on the Hearthstone site. It's worth seeing. So N'Zoth is a 10 mana legendary minion, 5 attack, 7 health that reads Battlecry. Summon your Death Rattle minions that died this game. And before anybody asks, we've confirmed, Blizzard has already stated online, this works very similar to the mechanic for Anything Can Happen. It just grabs at random Death Rattle minions that have died already in the game at some point until your board is full. So this has the potential to be a really swingy card that just makes for an incredible late game impact, provided that you're in a place where your 10 mana turn can be spent just building a new board, and that you're not at risk of dying already. But conceptually, I love it. Death Rattle's in a weird place right now where there's not very many good Death Rattle minions. There's a handful, but some of them are class cards like Tyrion or Ronin. So, I mean, until we see more new shiny Death Rattle cards come out in the Old Gods expansion set, I don't know that you're actually going to be able to make really, really good, efficient use of this card with all the Death Rattle stuff that's leaving with Nax and GVG. JR, what do you think?
I really like this card. I want to see it happen. I want to see a Hunter deck around this card, because Hunter has the best Death Rattle card in the game that's in Classic, and that's your Savannah Highmane. You got 2 of those. You play maybe Sylvanas at some point, and then maybe some Harvest Golems or something like that. You don't want to put too many Death Rattle cards in your deck with this. For the simple fact that there's no order in which ones are going to get summoned when this card gets played. So you really only want to play a handful, so that way you can control what Death Rattle cards are going to come back into play. because it just has a random effect. Like if you play a ton of small Death Rattles and you play a couple Savannah High Mains, you play this, you may not get your Savannah High Mains, and that would be very disappointing. But I think I definitely want to try a Hunter deck with this card. So what do you think, John?
You guys hit it on the head. You don't need to hear me ramble about more cards. I feel like you guys do such a good job at it already. I will just say I agree with what you guys are saying. Really promising card. Really great card art. It's a good card. It'll definitely be tried out for the first couple weeks after the expansion, unless it fails miserably. It'll probably stay in some form until there's a sure way to counteract that, which I'm not really sure what there would be. Next up, we've got the Undercity Huckster. It's a 2-mana rare rogue minion, 2/2. It's a 2 attack, 2 health, reads Death Rattle, add a random class card to your hand from your opponent's class. Why not, right? Solid, easy, whatever, solid 2/2. Kevin, any reason that this isn't a fine card?
I mean, it fine is a good word for it. I don't think it's competitive with lots of the other 2-drops in the game in general right now. And I think you would have to be basically just banking on getting tremendously lucky and getting something super worthwhile out of it. Class card tends to mean that you're going to draw spells, which can be pretty applicable for Rogue in particular. Rogue is still very like spell synergy heavy, so there might be some value in pulling like a really valuable or powerful spell from your opponent. And class minions are also obviously much more powerful than non-class minions. Like you tend to get a better stat block on a class minion than a non-class minion. All of that said, though, it just seems like the self-replacing card mechanic with a totally random card thing, like it's Burgle with a body in a weird way, and I don't think Burgle got any play. I don't know that this is a better choice. Like Rogue really wants to establish itself on the board. If you're going to play like a tempo style Rogue, a 2/2 for 2 is not what you want to be throwing on the board, and getting that random card is a perk, but I don't know if it's a perk that actually like swings the game in a meaningful fashion. If that draws you a bad Paladin secret or something, are you any further ahead than if you had just played a 2/3 for 2?
There are no bad Paladin secrets. There are none.
Eye for an eye would like a word.
The best. Throw Eye for an Eye in your secret Paladin decks this week and tell me how many people it doesn't absolutely screw with. Anyways, I totally agree with you. It reminds me a lot of Mounted Raptor in a lot of ways, where it's like, I think it could be a really good card and I think it should see more play, but it just doesn't because it's slightly undercosted and the Death Rattle just isn't really strong enough. It's too easy to deal with. And there will be games that are won because you got an awesome Pyroblast from against a mage on your Undercity Huckster, and it'll go to Reddit and you'll get a bunch of karma for it. But there probably won't be a lot of people winning tournaments with that. And so I don't think it's truly competitive when it comes down to it. JR, last thoughts.
I basically agree with what you guys are saying. I'd rather play anything almost in a 2 spot over this. It's enticing to get that random class card, but I would have rather seen it like Battle Cry with Discover or something like that to do that. But that's just me.
All right, Kevin, tell us about the cutest new card in the Old Gods expansion, the Spawn of N'Zoth.
Sure. Spawn of N'Zoth is a 3-mana 2/2 common minion. Reads Death Rattle, give your minions +1/+1. So this has the potential, I think, to be really cool because you really only need that Death Rattle to hit any other one body, and it's worthwhile. But if it hits more than that, you're getting tremendous value out of it. It's not a powerful enough effect that you would bother, I don't think, to silence it because there's so little silence in the game, and likely going to be they're not introducing a new silence. If anything, they may get rid of some silence effects out of the game that exist already today. So I think this is a card that will consistently go off. This is the kind of thing that will facilitate Token Druid or Egg Druid or a lot of those sort of like really aggressive, fast board floody styles of decks, because 3 mana is a great spot to be able to throw this down and have this effect that your opponent just really, I mean, the best case they can do to play around it is kill all your other minions, which isn't always an option. So, and you, if you get to choose when you trade it, will be in a position to take really, really good advantage of it. So I just think it's going to be a card that has a couple of specific applications in those token style driven decks. I don't know. I like it. John, what do you think?
I think this is one of the first cards that we've seen that could read anti-taunt, right? Because you want to attack everything else besides this before you let that death rattle go off. So it's got some really interesting implications. You're totally right. It's probably not dangerous enough to like silence or anything like that. And so I don't think you'll see that. Not to mention there aren't enough silences in the game anyways to really do that without severely crippling your deck. So I think it's totally fine. There are certain classes that'll benefit from a 2 or a 3 mana 2/2 than others. Like there are certain classes that I don't know if I want to play it with, like maybe Priest. I don't think I would want to play that in Priest because there's just so slow. So like that would be a very late game card, and it's very 1 or 2 minion, at a time on your board. But I think Warlock, I think some faster forms of Druid and Paladin can really benefit from a card like this. JR?
Yeah, I think it has potential to find its way into Zoo Warlock. I think you could have some fun with it on maybe getting it out there and then potentially destroying this guy at the end of your turn when you play him as well. I don't know if you would necessarily do that, but you would definitely only be playing, like you would not be playing this probably on a turn 3. You would be playing it when you already have a really big board to begin with. For the reasons that you said, it forces your opponent to start taking out your other guys. I also see this card being picked a lot in Arena because I think in Arena this would be a very, very good card for the simple fact that whenever I play Arena, at least, I try to fill the board, and then getting this guy out there, very difficult to deal with in an Arena setting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. I think it's probably the type of card where you're right, you're never going to play it on curve, but it has the same sort of feel as like Dark Cultist did, where once it hits the board, you have to deal with everything else on the board before you're willing to clear it. So it's kind of like a weird board protection situation where if you can get it on the board behind anything else, now you've got a really great opportunity. If you could get it down behind a taunt and have the ability to choose when you traded with it, as long as it's not being removed by a spell or some kind of targeted effect, then you've got some really cool options. So like, it's not bad. It's not a bad card. It's going to be very limited in the styles of decks it gets play in, but it's cool.
Yep, absolutely. All right, the next one. So the next one that we have coming up here, it's an 8 mana legendary, reads the Boogie Monster. It's a 6 or 8 mana 6/7 that reads, whenever this minion attacks and kills another minion, gain +2/+2. JR, how do you like these apples?
Oh, man, for 8 mana, it's tough, but he's also really cool. A lot of it depends, and I hate to say this, if Big Game Hunter does get the nerf or not, which I think Big Game Hunter is going to get a nerf. So I don't know. Whenever this minion attacks and kills another minion, get +2/+2. You just keep killing little tiny minions and getting bigger. Give him taunt and watch him explode, I guess. And I don't know. I don't know what I'd replace him with though. I'd rather play Ragnaros or something like that, and with the 8 mana spot. So I think it's cool. But I think it's cool, but it's not something I'd probably play.
I think this could be cool in Priest. I think there's a lot of cool applications where you can keep healing it back up and kind of keeping it alive. But it reminds me a lot like the Divine Spirit type, not Divine Spirit. What is the one that doubles your health and your attack and all those things? Anyways, those kinds of decks, or like Gazrilla in Hunter, where it looks so good and you think it should work so well, but it just doesn't. But if I were going to put this into a deck, believe it or not, I'd put it into my Priest deck. What do you think, Kev?
I don't think it'll see play. I think the stat block is too low. This is like Boulder Fist Ogre levels. It's a 6-drop that happens to cost 8 mana, has no immediate impact on turn 8, when most of the good cards that you play on 7, 8, 9, 10 all have immediate impact. We've had this problem classically every time a new card set comes out, where we look at these cards and we're like, that's a neat effect. But like, this is a Gruul that doesn't work as well, costs more, requires you to kill an opposing minion, which means you're going to be trading away its health value. So best case scenario, you'd be chipping away at individual tokens or like 2-drops and not losing health faster than you're gaining it. Super vulnerable to lots of other types of removal, the executes and what have you like that. I don't know. On 8, I don't know any deck right now that would want to play this card over a lot of the existing neutral 8-drops, let alone most of the like good 7-drops. And that's excluding Dr. Boom because he's not going to be around. Like, I don't fancy myself ever running this card unless there's something we don't know about ways to give minions charge. It's like that Hunter card from a little while back, the Giant Sandworm. It's like a worse version of that, like a much worse version of that.
Yeah.
Fine. You can take your pessimism and just shove it. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. I'm just kidding.
I mean, if
you guys are totally right, though. It's not that great of a card, and there's so many cards that claim that every time it takes damage, do this, and the only 2 cards that we've seen that are actually successful in doing that is Grim Patron and Frothing Berserker. Everything else has been virtually worthless from the take damage, do something beneficial to you mechanic. And so Go ahead.
The card texture is so restrictive. Like, it's when it attacks, so it's not like it, even if other people are trading into it, like, it's not like you get the benefit of my opponent can't clear it because they have to do 7 damage in one
so
swing.
that throws my taunt thing clear out the window. I forgot about that.
Yeah, it's strictly when you attack with it. If it was every time it killed a minion, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, now this is interesting, because if it doesn't die to a spell, every time it trades with a minion, it's going to gain value, but it doesn't. Like, it's so incredibly slow. I don't think you would ever play it.
All right. Speaking of cards I don't think you would ever play, let's talk about this next one. Tentacles for Arms. It's a 5-mana 2/2 with a death rattle that says, it's a weapon, sorry. Epic weapon reads, Death Rattle, return this to your hand. Am I wrong in thinking that this is just way too slow and bad and awful to be any sort of meaningful measure of good? Am I wrong?
No.
No.
I love it.
I will say I like the death rattle of returning it to your hand. I just wish the stats were better. I wish it was something else.
It has to be bad, right? Like, if it was a 3/2 weapon, you would actually probably play it because it would be good enough that it would trade into a whole bunch of stuff like 2, 3, 4 drops. If it was more durability for 5 mana, you would probably play it again. In general right now, like, it had to be understated to justify the fact that there's nothing you can do. Like, you can't silence weapon death rattles. You will never not have this card. So ostensibly, maybe it could be useful in a fatigue situation exclusively, where you just kept equipping it and attacking with it forever, and to keep chipping your opponent down as they died to fatigue and you're trying to outrace them. But I mean, that gives up a 5-mana card slot in your deck to have that option for one use case. Unless, like to John's point from earlier about N'Zoth's first mate, unless there's something we don't know yet about weapon interactions, where you can play a weapon for less mana, or you can do something really cool with weapon interactions as warrior specifically that we've never seen up to this point, I don't think you would ever play it, because it's just not going to fly with what we know right now. So this might be the worst card that they've printed in this set.
They're tentacles. Of course they're not going to fly, Kevin. Come on.
But
come on. Next. Zero Poison Mind. JR, tell us about Zero Poison Mind.
So Zero Poison Mind was the rogue legendary that got revealed this week. It's a 4 mana with 3 attack, 2 health, and it has a battle cry and a death rattle effect that says add a random toxin card to your hand. And these toxin cards are pretty similar to the spare parts that we saw in GVG. They're little 1-mana spells. There's 5 of them that you can get. One of them gives friendly minion stealth until your next turn. One of them deals 2 damage. Return a friendly minion to your hand. It costs 2 less. Give a minion +3 attack, and then draw a card. Those are the 5 different toxins that you can get, which all of them are pretty decent. Some way better than others. You probably have about I would say 3 out of the 5 I would really like to have in my hand. But the fact of the matter is, you get one when this guy goes on the board when you play him, and you get another when he dies. And I think that's really good. I think it's a card that Rogue needed.
I was gonna, guys, this is the card that Rogue needs to finally make a minion-based Rogue work. We've said that every year since every expansion.
But it's a really good. It's a good 4-drop for Rogue, and it synergizes with a ton of. It synergizes with what Rogue does, which is combos.
It does do that. I will totally agree. It does do that. It reminds me a lot of a New Barak, where there's so many good things about that card, but at the end of the day, when you have a 2-mana minion or a 2-health minion that you're playing on turn 4, I just don't think that those little 1-mana presents are worth it. I just don't. I think that at the end of the day, this is a really exciting card, and everybody who hears this podcast should be excited about this card. But also, do not cry when you find out that it's not that great in competitive Hearthstone. So that's all I would say.
I think you mostly nailed it, John. The problem is that so it has the stats of a 2-drop, right? And for a 2-drop, the other cost is going into getting these 2 1-mana spells that of their own are not better than any other 1-mana spell that you could have just put in your deck instead. The fact that it generates them instead of you having to put them in your deck is nice, except that they're kind of random. But I mean, it's Shadow Step, a slightly different version of Cold Blood, a different Conceal, a slightly different Backstab, kind of, and like a Shiv that doesn't do damage, right? Like, they're not good spells in and of themselves. So you're 100% strictly running this for spell synergy or ways to trigger combos. And as it stands, I mean, I feel like Rogue has been trying to get away from that. And I feel like the style of Rogue that would run Zeril in the first place, that wants minion presence on the board, is this type of Rogue that doesn't want those triggers and activators, because the only combo cards you run in like a tempo Rogue are things like SI7. And you're never going to use a 4-mana minion to generate a 1-mana spell to trigger your SI7 on turn 8 or whatever. Like, it's a weird set of synergies that doesn't make a lot of sense. They're very cool and they're very like interesting, but cool and interesting do not necessarily equal competitive play. You're right.
All right.
I disagree with you guys, by the way. I think it's a great card.
And you should, because I want Kevin, and I know you want this too. Kevin and I want to be wrong.
I want to be wrong. 10 times out of 10, I want to be wrong. I want the cool cards to be the ones that work, but they just...
I want this to be the next spare part for Rogue type thing. Lots of great synergies with spells, bring back, Auctioneer and all these different things.
Super good in Wild with Gazlo.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't see it. I'm too skeptical. And again, part of it, I think we're just taught so much that the minions base stats are the key to a card being good in Hearthstone as it sits currently. You can have the best card and the best effect in the world, but if the base stats suck, it just doesn't see play. And for that mana, you literally take the card text off of it and go 4-mana 3/2. Would you play it? Nope. Then you don't see play. And that's part, I think we're just taught that because of how Hearthstone exists now, because there are so many cards that are significantly higher than that base stat threshold, a la Piloted Shredder, a la Sludge Belcher, and these other these other cards that maybe it's my stupidity that I don't know how to think yet with cards that can be worth less than their base stats are worth because they have such powerful card text. But there are very few. I'm thinking Grim Patron is one that's statted below that does really well. Sir Finley, I guess, kind of could be argued that he's statted a little low. There's just a few of those that are statted low that still see play because their effects are so strong.
So answer me this question, John, because I think this is the easiest way is just to do a straight comparison. Why, if your goal is a minion-driven rogue that's going to play spells to activate combo, on turn 4, why would you play this card over Tomb Pillager?
Because Tomb Pillager has ugly card art.
Okay, good point. Next.
I get what you're saying. That's actually a good point. I mean, I don't get the 2 spells, but you're right. In a minion-based deck, that would be better. What about in Oil Rogue, though? What about
There's
in
no
some
oil.
sort of, well, I mean, in some sort of spell-driven rogue?
I mean, because you don't have any control over which spells you get, like what happens when you throw it down thinking that you'll battle cry into something really useful and you get Blood Thistle Toxin, return a friendly minion to your hand, you get the bad Shadow Step card that doesn't help you at all, and Fade Leaf Toxin, which is a bad conceal. Like, I don't know. I think you're basically 100% banking on getting the good ones. You're banking on getting 2 direct damage for 1 mana, which is just Arcane Shot, or draw a card for 1 mana, which is the cheapest and most efficient card draw card in the game. That might be useful and might be a good trigger if it's cycling into a Gadget Zen Auctioneer or being played to trigger a combo. But again, like I would rather 10 times out of 10, I would rather play the Tomb Pillager, have the better body that can trade way more efficiently, can kill a 5-drop, can kill a 6-drop in some cases, and I get the coin back on the Death Rattle that I can use to do most of those same things. If all I'm after is straight combo synergy.
I'm not going to say...
If I need 1 mana spells to make like a Malagos rogue work, I'm going to put them in my deck. I'm not going to bank on drawing them from Zero.
Calling it now. Miracle Rogue's coming back.
I said the same thing about Axe Flinger. I'm just saying. But anyways, I love your thinking. I am not going to be pessimistic about any more cards for the rest of the day. I can promise you guys that. So let's go on to the next one. Infest. It's a 3-mana hunter card. Hunter spell. It's a rare spell. Reads, give your minion Death Rattle, add a random beast to your hand. This is the card that Beast Hunter needed, guys. This is the card. This is what's going to take Beast Hunter from here to way the heck up here. On a serious note, I actually think this could be really cool. Combine it with like a Unleash the Hounds. Decks like that. So imagine being able to just, for 6 mana, unleash and then throw down Infest and fill up your hand as you clear up a board or something like that. I think there's a lot of cool synergies with this card. I think it's a good spell. I think it's an interesting spell, and I think it'll make you play Hunter differently, which is something that we don't get to do. So I love this card. Kevin.
So I'm constantly the person who bags on not playing cards that are combo specific. I would never play this with Unleash the Hounds because on turn 6, if my best play is Unleash into Infest to try to generate alternate beasts to put down on the board, like they have to die for you to draw into these new beasts. So if my best play is Unleash, feed my 1/1 Hounds into my opponent's minions to try and draw new cards, I have a whole other set of problems and I'm way behind on board and probably dying. Like this is the type of card that I think you're going to play in. If some kind of like tempo-y control hunter becomes a thing where you want to play out on curve and you want to take advantage of going back and really taking advantage of Houndmaster, Scavenging Hyenas, obviously playing out Savannah Highmanes, then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, okay, if I put Savannah Highmane down and it doesn't get polymorphed, worst case scenario, I probably get to play Infest behind that next turn on the 2/2/2 Hyenas that are left behind. There's probably places like that where you can create some sustain and stay in the game in some kind of like tempo-y mid-range Beast Hunter or some kind of control game. But I don't think there's any way that you ever want to play this as a combo card. Like you don't want to play this on the back of some other play that you're already making. You want to play this when you need to refill your hand, when you're all out of options, but you've got 4 minions that are on the board because you've managed to build a board presence that you can now do something with to refill your hand and continue to apply pressure.
JR, come to my side here. Come over here.
I would like to say the Starving Buzzard Unleash the Hounds was 5-mana combo, which was amazing because it allowed you to draw cards. And this is 1 mana more. Yeah, you're not drawing the cards that you have in your deck. Instead, you're generating new cards. I think it has potential to be pretty powerful. And remember, the Buzzard Unleash the Hounds combo got nerfed because it was powerful. This isn't obviously going to be as powerful, but I still think it's going to be a pretty decent combo. I do see hunters trying to use this, and I do see it in more of a mid-range style deck.
It's going to happen, guys. This is the card that Ball of Spiders should have been. That's all I'm going to say. This is what Ball of Spiders should have been last expansion. We're going to move on, though, to our last card. We have to. We got to get going. Ragnaros Lightlord. Kevin, tell us about the most exciting, the best, the sexiest card we've seen so far in the Old Gods expansion.
Yeah, this is really cool. So earlier today, IGN unveiled this card, and the backstory that Blizzard is throwing at us that Ben Brode gave them in an interview is basically when the Old Gods show up and all of these like minions get corrupted, the inverse is also going to happen in some cases, and these crazy evil creatures who were trying to like run our world and cause problems are going to turn around and say, no, we saw this place first, and they're going to do battle against the Old Gods. And Ragnaros is going to be one of those dudes who says, like, are you a bad enough dude to stop the Old Gods, and turn around and do something about it, which is super cool. So Ragnaros the Lightlord is an 8-mana 8/8 that reads, at the end of your turn, restore 8 health to a damaged friendly character. The big differences between this and the traditional Ragnaros are that it does not have the cannot attack tag. So this is an 8-mana 8/8 that you will play, has immediate board impact just like the original Ragnaros, albeit in a very different fashion, and that the next turn you're swinging for 8 with, while it still has its card text and effects. I think this has some very like cool potential. Right now, I think there's probably a lot of people looking at this wondering what JR was saying earlier about Big Game Hunter. If there's going to be a ton of really easy ways to remove big minions, I don't think you would ever play this over Tyrion, which is your go-to 8-drop right now in Paladin. But if you can keep it alive, you can pick when to put this down. And unlike Lightwell, which is kind of like, this is Lightwell on steroids, is what a lot of people have been saying online. But unlike Lightwell, the triggered effect is at the end of your turn, not the beginning of your following turn. So you're going to get the 8 health from playing it. And if you're playing smart, you're going to control where it goes. You're not going to put it down when you've got damaged minions on the board. You're going to play it when you know you get that heal to your face for 8, which is the same amount you used to get from an antique heal bot. It's the same amount of healing you get from Lay on Hands. So now instead of playing Lay on Hands for 3 cards and 8 heals, you're going to play Ragnaros for an 8/8 body and that same heal, which is crazy. Like, the applications for this card are nuts if it can survive. So I am 100% on board with this being amazing in Paladin of every flavor, because Paladin, there's never, like, other than like pure out aggro Paladin, every Paladin deck, whether it's been mid-range Paladin and using tokens, or it's been secret Paladin or whatever, they all want to curve out. They all want some kind of beefy late game drop. This would be the beefy late game drop. This actually, in some ways, if 8/8 isn't vulnerable to BGH, is probably better than Tyrion in a lot of particular cases. And I would run it, absolutely. But you have to know that removal question, and until we do, it's really hard to give it a straight answer.
JR.
I sort of agree with Kevin on this. I don't think you're going to see it in every single Paladin deck, because I think there are a lot of instances where I would rather run Tyrion. And I know that some play Tyrion and some play Ragnaros now, the Ragnaros the Firelord. But I don't know if I would run both of these. I would run one or the other. I really want to see this in a Helidon deck that we were talking about last week, which I thought would finally come back, and Kevin said no, it wasn't going to. But I think this is a card that's going to make it come back now. It's an anti-kill bot on steroids. I mean, the anti-kill bot, yeah, it's 5 mana, 3/3 heals for the same amount. But this time, for 3 more mana, you have an 8/8 instead. And if you're just sitting there with a Helidon, just healing, this card's great. It can potentially heal itself. I'm excited about this card. I really like it. My favorite thing about this card is how angry lore nerds are about it, though. That is my favorite part about this card.
Yep. Yep, I do love that so much. Okay, I got to chime in here. And I said I wouldn't down any more cards. I would be much more optimistic. But I have to beg the question here. So, obviously, the downside of the existing Ragnaros, the Firelord, is that he can't attack. But the upside is 8 damage guaranteed, and it can bypass taunt, technically. Those are kind of the upsides. We don't see a lot of 8/8 8/8s played currently. To Kevin's point, It could be solely based on the fact that BGH exists. It really could be. I'm not sure. I'm not good enough at the game. I would like to believe that there are enough 8/8s in the game that if they were well costed, a la Giants, people would still play them, that they do a la Giants. And so for this one, I'm actually a little bit more cautious. I think that while yes, it can attack, and that's a really, really big positive, and yes, you get that heal, guaranteed heal, kind of like Ragnaros. You like to think that you play Ragnaros on an empty board or on a 50-50, where whether it goes face or kills that 5/5 Thaurissan, you're good either way. And a lot of times it happens where there's 2 or 3 or 4 minions on your opponent's board and you need it to do something, but instead of it doing anything offensive, it ends up doing something defensive. And because of that, I don't know, and I need to spend more time and meditate and think and pray about this card, because right now, as it exists, I don't know if it's better. I don't know if it's worse. Maybe it's just strictly different. But I don't know. I don't even think I can form a really good judgment. All I can say is right now, with the current meta that we're in, I think I would rather play regular Ragnaros. I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy.
Well, so here's the thing, right? 8 mana is one of those spots that's really awkward in most existing decks if you want an 8 mana minion. Right now, other than Grom, because Grom is such an obvious play in Warrior, there's very few 8 mana minions that see play. Certain variants on Shaman play Alakir, and Paladin plays Tyrion. The other ones that you might see are sometimes a neutral Rag, and unfortunately, sometimes a neutral Kel'Thuzad just getting rotated out. You don't generally see people intentionally playing Chromagus or Foe Reaper or any of the non-legendary 8 drops because they're all terrible. So this is actually really, like, if this was a neutral minion, I think it'd get played all over town. The fact that it's Paladin exclusive is basically going to come down to, does Paladin need a way to self-heal in this stage of the game that isn't lay on hands, that isn't the other healing options, because there's so many in Paladin already? And if they do, is an 8/8 body going to stick? Because if an 8/8 body is going to stick, if BGH goes away or if something else happens that makes it so that 8/8 bodies aren't so vulnerable, everybody will be playing 8/8s and big body minions all the time, right? It's because you're going to have to use way different removal tactics. We're going to see the comeback of Hex and Polymorph. We're going to see tons of Twisting Nether. A lot of the big removal that we're used to seeing is going away. There's no more Light Bomb. Like, I think this is going to be the opportunity, if BGH gets tweaked, for a lot of these cards to really see tons of cool play. So I'm what is the line, John? Cautiously optimistic?
Cautiously optimistic. TM.
I am full on the Swagneros train. Count me in.
All right. Well, let's get that. That's going to end our card review. We've done plenty of
too
it
much
already. Way too much. We want to talk a little bit about the Hearthhead meta report that came out this last week. And even though none of us really know about this Hearthhead meta report, especially Kevin, he's kind of clueless about it. Kevin, I would love for you to give us the lowdown anyway. By the way, disclaimer, Kevin wrote this thing, okay? It's the best, in my opinion, the best meta report there is out there. If you are a newish to intermediate, even to a higher level player, as like my primary source of what to see on the ladder. So I brag about Kevin all the time about his meta report. That's why I'm being mean to him right now. Kevin, take it away.
All right. I feel bad, like, pumping my own tires, but yeah, it's one of the meta reports that's out there, one of the few that's getting updated on a regular basis right now. We have been trying really hard to, like, reach out to pro players, ask around and get some information on what people think is happening. And for the first time since we started doing this like 2.5 months ago, we're actually hearing from the pros that things are shifting on ladder. And we are specifically, I think, talking about the ladder environment a little bit, because obviously what you're seeing in tournaments has gone very control heavy. There's a lot of stuff that's happening that's very much tailored to the, like, I'm going to bring like Elise Warrior and like late game Demon Reno Lock stuff. But on the ladder, it's still very much that mid-range board driven. That's what everybody's playing. And so to get ranked up, they actually said that the top deck in the game right now is Zoo. People are running a ton of Zoo, and it's super hard to answer because so many other things have started to answer Freeze Mage. With Freeze Mage on the way out and not making as big of an appearance anymore, that's the one really gross natural counter to Zoo. So Zoo has just kind of like spiraled out of control, and it's all over the place on the ladder. There's some other stuff on here that you would expect to see, like Midrange Druid is still right up there, Secret Paladin still right up there. But there are some new recommendations this week. Elise Control Warrior comes in at rank 4, which is a super cool deck. Yeah, really, I think it would be rated higher, but it's just tough to play. Like, the execution required to pull it off is not super easy to learn. So if you're not comfortable playing late game control decks and knowing all the ins and outs and how to play to the fatigue win condition in control mirrors, this is not a great deck to play, but it is very powerful. And Reno Lock is 5th.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you before you talk about Reno Lock, because Elise Control Warrior, in my opinion, the reason why it's not up there higher is simply because it doesn't do that well against Zoo. Because Zoo, with the Death Rattle minions, they really need both brawls to happen in order to make it work. I have like a 75% win rate against this Elise Control Warrior as Zoo, and I'm not even a very good Zoo player. Sorry. Reno Warlock, you were saying.
Well, no, and to your point, I think that's exactly what's happening is a lot of people are seeing this deck played. They're seeing it played in tournaments. They're seeing it played at Legend on stream, and they think, oh, it looks like it's super effective. And it is. But if you're not the type of player who can wait and very carefully calculate when to use the removal and how, like, if you play one of your brawls too early, or if you waste a revenge answering an implosion or something, like, you will lose to Zoo 10 times out of 10. Absolutely. So you have to be very, very good at doing a lot of more complicated, longer term thinking about how you're going to win the game. So yeah, and then Reno Warlock, the version that runs the Arcane Golem Power Roaming Faceless combo, is the 5th deck that kind of rounds out the top 5. And the anti-meta suggestions that we got were from Orange, and they're Aggro Druid and a new version of Aggro Shaman that gives up the Lava Shocks and Ancestral Knowledges, swaps in Loot Hoarders and Piloted Shredders. So it actually causes a little bit of a mid-game and can play for the board if it doesn't win outright with all the usual Aggro Shaman shenanigans. So what did you guys think? Is this agreeing with what you're seeing on ladder?
Yes, 100% completely. 100% yes. Very good. I think the highest skill players may make a try to make a point that mid-range Druid is just so consistent that maybe those two are really interchangeable. I feel like the 1 and 2 slots almost every week are, but 100% yes. Aggro Druid and Aggro Shaman, super good against these decks. I think it's a home run, Kev. I really do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with this list. Like, out of all, like, this is absolutely what I'm even seeing on the ladder right now. Like, I'm seeing Zoo Warlock way more than I am Midrange Druid anymore, and way more than Secret Paladin. The Elise Control Warrior is probably one of my favorite decks that I've been playing for a good while, and then took a back seat because it didn't have a very good win rate, but at a higher level I could see totally where it would. And then Reno Warlock, like, these are the 5 decks that I almost always see on the ladder right now.
Yep.
So
yeah, and they've totally squeezed out Patron and Freeze Mage, which were the big things like even 2-3 weeks ago. So
totally, I think you nailed it. I think it's a great meta report. Make sure you guys check that out on Hearthhead every week.
Every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks, sorry. Every 2 weeks, because it's pretty on point. Do you guys plan on doing it every week once things start changing again, or is it just strictly going to be an every 2 week thing?
Honestly, that's probably a question for my editor. Right now, it's going to be bi-weekly. Once Standard hits, I don't know if we would try to ramp it up and do it more often.
Okay, that's fair.
When I know, you'll know.
All right, no, fair enough.
I have a quick question about that. When Standard hits, are you going to specifically target Standard, or are you going to do anything with Wild as well?
I think in the short term, we'll specifically target Standard because that's what the pros will be playing. And so when we reach out for opinions on what's being played on ladder, that's what people are going to be talking about, is what's being played in Standard. I would love to, kind of the same way we have the like anti-meta picks for if you want to play something that isn't one of these 5 decks, but you still want to be competitive, what can you try? I would love to be able to say, like, hey, if you're playing around in Wild and you just want to have some fun and rank up on that side, what deck would we recommend? And just have a couple of quick recommendations of what's prominent in Wild at any given time. But I don't think Wild's going to have anywhere near the same established metagame that Standard will, because there's going to be, in my mind at this point, far less wild players. So we'll try to speak to it as best we can, but I don't think we'll have a separate meta report. I don't think we'll actually have a full like indexed, these are the things you should do in wild, the same way we do for Standard.
I think there's going to be a lot of wild players. Actually, I think it's going to depend on how the casual players, like where they end up playing. If they end up playing Standard or Wild, I think there's a lot more casual player. I mean, there's a lot more casual players than competitive players. Let's be honest. So it'll be interesting to see which one. But as far as competitive goes, Standard, absolutely, I agree.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I think we really got to get out of here. But first, for those who come here for their tournament news and things like that, a big congratulations to Dione over at the APAC Winter Championships for taking first place and getting the first Asia Pacific spot at BlizzCon. Big congratulations.
And if you didn't see those series, 100% when the VODs are up on YouTube, worth watching, because I know they played at a crazy time of day. It was like 4 a.m. if you wanted to see the final. But that last series is such a nail biter. You have to watch it.
Definitely. And also there was a big tournament this week. The Multiplay Esports Insomnia True Silver Championship did go on this last week. It was a 3-day Swiss tournament. I didn't even get to see the winner yet because I've been so busy trying to get all these new cards in here. But some of the biggest names in Hearthstone, basically anyone with any sort of name at all in Hearthstone, was at this tournament. So something to check out. Watch the VODs. It was very good. No new emails this week. If you guys have a question you want to hear on the show, send us your emails to wellmet@blizzpro.com and we will do our best to answer them on the show. Kev, Patreon stuff.
Yeah, we're still looking forward to pumping up our Patreon campaign. You can check out all the details over at patreon.com/wellmetpodcast. We are getting closer, guys, to doing that bonus episode every month. And John, I hope you've got some plans for a big call-in show for everybody soon, because that's been something that's been on our minds for a little while. But this week, special thanks we want to go out to Jonathan K, David L, and Zach W, our new patrons this week, as well as always our friends of the show, Martin Z, Sean G, and Albert T. Thank you so much for your highly significant support of the show. You're making this so possible for us, and we are immensely thankful.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Thank you so much. JR, iTunes reviews.
Yeah, we had one iTunes review this week coming from Kevin's homeland there in Canada. My cousin, Vinny Z23. He's not really my cousin.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't. My cousin. I was making a joke that I probably just dated myself with.
Yeah, I don't get it.
But if you want to leave an iTunes review, absolutely go do so. It'd help us out a ton. We would be very appreciative. You guys are awesome. You just go over to iTunes, type in Hearthstone, and we should come up on that list on podcasts. Click a little star there and leave us a review. Be awesome.
Yes, please. Those mean the world to us. Let's go ahead and get out of here, though. So for me, don't forget, next week we've got Tannen Grace, Jocelyn Moffitt, and Ray C591 on this show, talking about what it takes to be a legend player, and just having a great time talking about the new cards as JR and Kevin are gone. And as for me, small shout out for me, I am streaming a lot more. So if you want to come hang out, twitch.tv/kicktripod. Try to stream about 3 to 4 nights a week right now. So I'm actually going to be streaming after the show because Kevin and JR have to leave. So we'll be doing that as well. So yeah, Kevin, what about you? Shout outs this week.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy week. I will not be here next week because I'll be leaving for Vegas. I'm going to be at the iGaming North America conference, doing the panel on esports at the Planet Hollywood Hotel right there on the Vegas Strip, which is super cool. So I'm very excited to do that. And big shout out to the friends and family I got to hang out with over Easter, as well as all the people who are thinking about coming out. We're going to do a local tournament here coming up. Not an official fireside gathering because I don't think we can get it approved, but we're going to try to put on a small tournament over at the Mana Bar before it opens up here in downtown Saskatoon. So could be a lot of fun. If you're interested, find me in the Saskatchewan Hearthstone Players group on Facebook, and I'll give you all the details.
There's a Saskatchewan Hearthstone Players group?
There totally is. People are always in there talking about like what their favorite new cards are, sharing deck lists, helping people solve like the different new adventure modes as they come out. It's awesome. It's great. I think this game has such a huge community that there's little pockets like that everywhere you go.
That's awesome. JR, what about you, man?
I just wanted to give a shout out to our clan, the Well Met Clashers clan for Clash Royale, and it makes me really, really want a Hearthstone clan to happen so badly right now. Because you guys have been pretty fun to play with this week. I really want to see that in Hearthstone. But like I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to come hang out with us, discord.blizzpro.com. It's a great chat channel, text and voice. It's just, you can use it in web browser, mobile device. You can download the desktop app. It's a pretty cool application. We are pretty active on there and chat about Hearthstone stuff. So whenever there's a new reveal, we usually talk about those in the channel there. So definitely come check us out.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's going to about do it for us this week. You can tune in together with your friends live every Sunday on twitch.tv/BlizzPro at 7 p.m. Pacific, or find us on your favorite podcast outlets throughout the week. For updates throughout the week, follow us on Twitter at WellMetPodcast, and WellMet is entirely supported by our fans, so find out more at patreon.com/WellMetPodcast. We always have merch at the store, or at store.blizzpro.com, so head over there, wear one of these comfy American Apparel shirts. They're really great. I'm really comfortable, and I wear it way too often. And as always, a big thank you to Jake Buttineau over at jakebuttineau.ca for our music and site designs for our graphics. Thank you again for joining us for episode 54 of Well Met. We will see you next time.
Well Met is a production of BlizzPro.com. The show records live at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at twitch.tv/BlizzPro. To get the latest news and information about the show, follow us on Twitter at WellMetPodcast, or join us on our subreddit at reddit.com/r/WellMetPodcast. If you would like to support the show, you can find out how at patreon.com/WellMetPodcast.
Cash.